Welcome. Thank you for taking the time to interview today. Let's start with some basic technical questions. Can you tell me what the role of a technical advisor entails, in your own words?
Of course, a technical advisor acts as a bridge between the technical team and clients or other departments. My role would include providing technical expertise, ensuring projects are technically sound, and guiding clients or internal teams on best practices, product features, and troubleshooting. It's essential to have strong communication skills to translate complex technical concepts into understandable language for non-technical stakeholders.
Great. Now let's dive into some technical aspects. Can you explain the difference between an API and a web service?
Sure. An API, Application Programming Interface, is a set of rules that allows different software applications to communicate with each other. It defines how requests should be made, how data is passed, and how responses are formatted. A web service is a specific type of API that operates over a network, typically using HTTP, HTTPS protocols. It allows different applications to interact with each other over the web. While all web services are APIs, not all APIs are web services.
That's a solid explanation. Moving on to something more hands-on. How would you troubleshoot a system that's running slow? What steps would you take?
First, I'd analyze the performance bottleneck. I'd begin by looking at server resources like CPU, memory, and disk usage. Tools like Top, HTOP, or Task Manager for Windows help identify any resource spikes. Then, I'd check application logs for errors or unusual activity. I'd also check for network issues and database performance by running queries to see if any are particularly slow. Once I identify the root cause, I would optimize accordingly, whether that involves server tuning, optimizing database queries, or addressing inefficient code.
Excellent. Let's talk about project management. How do you prioritize technical tasks when managing multiple projects?
In my experience, I prioritize tasks based on their impact and urgency. First, I make sure to understand the business needs and technical requirements for each project. I focus on high-impact, high-priority tasks first, especially those that affect deadlines or the user experience. I also break down larger tasks into smaller, manageable chunks to track progress more easily. Collaboration with team members is key, so I often adjust priorities based on their inputs and resources available.
Sounds like a solid approach. Now, for a technical question. Can you explain the concept of version control and why it's important in software development?
Version control is a system that tracks changes to code over time, allowing multiple developers to collaborate on the same project. It lets you revert to previous versions if something goes wrong and ensures everyone is working on the latest version. Tools like Git are widely used for version control. It's crucial because it reduces the risk of losing work, simplifies collaboration, and provides an audit trail for changes made to the codebase.
Good. Let's wrap up with some behavioral questions. Can you describe a time when you had to manage a conflict between technical and non-technical teams?
Sure. In my previous role, there was a situation where the product team wanted to launch a feature that was technically challenging and required additional development time. The marketing team, on the other hand, had already planned the product's promotional campaign. I facilitated a meeting between both teams, where I helped the technical team explain the feasibility and risks of the proposed feature. I also worked with the marketing team to adjust their timeline and expectations. In the end, we agreed on a phased launch, where a minimal viable version of the feature was delivered initially, and the full version was launched later. This compromise ensured both teams were on the same page.
That's a great example of collaboration. Lastly, how do you stay up to date with new technologies in the fast-paced tech industry?
I make it a habit to regularly read industry blogs, attend webinars, and participate in tech conferences. I also follow thought leaders on platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn to stay informed about trends. Additionally, I spend time experimenting with new tools or technologies in my personal projects to gain hands-on experience.
Let's dive deeper into some technical aspects. Can you explain how you would implement a caching mechanism in a web application?
Sure. Caching is a technique used to store frequently accessed data in a temporary storage, like memory, to improve performance. In a web application, I would first analyze which data needs to be cached, typically things like database queries, API responses, or static assets. I would choose the right caching strategy based on the nature of the data. For example, for data that changes infrequently, I might use server-side caching, e.g., Redis or Memcached, to store data in memory. For static files like images or style sheets, a content delivery network, CDN, might be appropriate. Cache expiration policies are important to ensure that stale data doesn't cause issues, so I would carefully set TTL, time to live, values.
That's a great approach. Now, can you explain the difference between SQL and NoSQL databases, and when would you use one over the other?
SQL databases are relational databases that use structured query language to manage and manipulate data. They are ideal for applications that require complex queries, transactions, and data consistency. Examples include MySQL, PostgreSQL, and Oracle. On the other hand, NoSQL databases are non-relational, and they store data in a more flexible format, such as documents, key-value pairs, graphs, or wide columns. They are typically used for applications that require scalability, high performance, or flexible data structures. For example, MongoDB and Cassandra are popular NoSQL databases. I would use SQL when data integrity and complex queries are a priority, and NoSQL when the data structure is unstructured or when scalability and flexibility are more important.
That's a clear explanation. Moving on, how would you handle security in a web application?
Security is a multi-layered approach. First, I would ensure secure communication by enforcing HTTPS across the application. Next, for user authentication and authorization, I'd implement strong password policies, multi-factor authentication, MFA, and session management best practices. I'd also ensure that sensitive data is encrypted both in transit, using SSL/TLS, and at rest, using encryption algorithms like AES. I would regularly test for vulnerabilities by performing security audits and using tools like OWASP Zap or Burp Suite. Additionally, input validation and sanitization are critical to prevent attacks like SQL injection, XSS, and CSRF. Using a web application firewall, WAF, can help mitigate many common threats.
Those are important steps. Let's switch gears. Can you describe a challenging project you worked on and how you overcame obstacles to deliver it successfully?
One project that comes to mind was a migration of a legacy system to a cloud infrastructure. The legacy system had complex business logic, and moving it to the cloud required re-architecting several parts of the application. There were some compatibility issues with old libraries, and the team was also unsure about how to handle data synchronization between the old and new systems. I led the effort by breaking the project down into manageable phases. First, we tackled the most critical pieces of functionality, ensuring they were working in the cloud before migrating others. I coordinated with the cloud team to set up proper monitoring and logging, which helped identify performance bottlenecks early on. Throughout the process, we maintained strong communication between the technical team and stakeholders, adjusting the timeline as needed. Ultimately, we successfully migrated the system with minimal downtime.
That sounds like a complex task, but it's clear you handled it well. Now, let's talk about team collaboration. How do you handle disagreements within a technical team when it comes to choosing the right technology or approach?
Disagreements can be healthy when it comes to choosing technologies, as they often bring different perspectives. I believe in fostering open discussions where everyone's opinions are heard. When disagreements arise, I encourage a solution-oriented approach where we focus on the pros and cons of each option. I make sure to involve all stakeholders, including non-technical ones, to ensure that decisions align with business goals. If necessary, I'd suggest running a small proof of concept or pilot project to validate our choice before fully committing. Ultimately, the goal is to choose the best solution for the project's needs, so I always try to guide the team toward a consensus that takes into account both technical feasibility and business objectives.
It's great to see how you handle collaboration. Now let's talk about leadership. As a technical advisor, you may have to mentor junior developers. How would you approach mentoring and guiding a junior team member?
I see mentoring as an opportunity to help junior developers grow, both technically and professionally. I would start by understanding their current skill level and their goals. Based on that, I would provide them with guidance and resources to build on their strengths and address any weaknesses. I believe in giving them real-world challenges, but breaking them down into smaller, manageable tasks. I would also encourage them to ask questions and seek feedback. Pair programming can be a great way to share knowledge and learn together. Additionally, I'd try to foster a growth mindset, emphasizing the importance of continuous learning and embracing failures as learning opportunities.
That's a fantastic approach to mentoring. Let's now talk about troubleshooting. Can you explain how you would diagnose and fix a server that is returning a 500 internal server error?
When dealing with a 500 internal server error, the first step is to look at the server logs to identify the cause of the error. Logs will usually provide details about the specific part of the application that's failing. I'd check the error messages and trace them back to the relevant code or configuration. If it's a database-related issue, I'd verify that the database is running and check for any connection issues. If it's related to server resources, like CPU or memory usage, I would check if there's been an overload. After identifying the issue, I would take the appropriate action, whether that's fixing the code, adjusting server configurations, or resolving resource limitations. Once the issue is resolved, I'd test the system to ensure it's stable and perform additional checks to prevent future occurrences.
Good troubleshooting approach. Lastly, how do you approach system scalability in a high-traffic web application?
Scalability is critical for high-traffic applications. I start by analyzing the system's current architecture to identify potential bottlenecks. For horizontal scalability, I would consider load balancing across multiple servers or using cloud services like AWS, which can scale resources dynamically. For database scalability, I'd look into sharding or replication to distribute the load. Caching is another key strategy to reduce database load and improve response times. I would also implement asynchronous processing for tasks that don't require immediate responses, such as background jobs, to avoid blocking the main application. Finally, I would use monitoring tools to continuously track the system's performance and make adjustments as needed.
That's a comprehensive approach to scalability. Well, I think we've covered most areas. Do you have any final questions for me?
Yes, I'd like to know more about the career progression opportunities for technical advisors in your company and how performance is typically evaluated.
Great question. We believe in continuous growth, so technical advisors can move into roles like senior advisor, solution architect, or even management positions depending on your career interests. Performance is typically evaluated based on your ability to contribute to project success, collaboration with teams, and overall impact on the business. We provide feedback regularly and ensure there are plenty of opportunities for learning and development.
That sounds like an excellent environment for growth. Thanks again for your time today.